Hello, thank you for joining us for our next episode in our Conversations with the Superintendent video series. We're very pleased to have all of our panelists here today and all of you who will be joining us virtually for this very important conversation related to budget and financial planning in District 65. So we're providing today's session in both English and Spanish. Both will be available on our District 65 website at district65.net. Let's go ahead and get started with an introduction of our panelists.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rafael Obafemi, the Chief Financial Officer for the district.
Hello, I'm Kathy Zaluski. I'm the Business Manager, CSBO.
And I'm Dr. Devon Horton, Superintendent. And my pronouns are he, him, and L.
Melissa Messenger, Director of Communications. Let's go ahead. Dr. Horton, if you want to go ahead and get us started.
Hello, District 65. We're glad that you could tune in to this episode of our Conversations with the Superintendent video series. Today, I'm joined by members of our Cabinet and Business Services Department to have a conversation about the district's budget planning, financial projections, and the ongoing structural deficit. We've launched a variety of communications and engagement opportunities within our community to seek your input as we work to address our current financial challenges and outlook. From our thought exchange tool to our board-hosted virtual community cafes to our forthcoming budget survey. Our school board and administrative team is committed to unprecedented inclusivity in this progress. We want to make sure that we hear from you and we share our thinking publicly. This will help to further ensure an equitable budgeting process and decision-making that more authentically reflects the needs of our community. Furthermore, despite financial challenges on the horizon, we are committed to not only approving annual balanced budgets, but taking the necessary steps in finally addressing the structural deficit that has plagued our district for decades. Understanding this is not something that this current leadership, board or administration is responsible for creating, but we are responsible for addressing. But doing so equitably and preserving instruction and the learning experience for all children. Let's move forward with some Q&A. I have asked our team to try and keep responses as simple as possible so we can build knowledge for those who have little or no understanding of our budgeting and financial process. Before we dive deeper into our financial outlook and the path forward, I think it would be helpful to build a foundation and a sense of the district's budgeting process. Where does money or district revenue come from? How do we spend our money? Kathy, can you talk more about this?
Yes, I can, Dr. Horton. So District 65 relies on three major sources of funding. The largest one consists of local property taxes paid by local businesses and taxpayers. And that amount, that piece of our budget amounts to 79%. We also take in state aid, which accounts for 10% of our revenue. It includes evidence-based funding and state categorical and grants. In addition, there is federal aid, revenues received for Head Start grant, Medicaid, Title grants, and that piece of our budget is equal to 7%. In addition, district collects other sources of revenues, fees for its buildings, childcare fees. We also collect lunch money for lunches that are being sold, and actually that revenue category has been affected the most by the pandemic.
Thanks, Kathy. That was a lot. I think our community appreciates your simplicity here. This is all very complex. I want to shift gears a bit now that we have a better sense of revenues and expenses and talk about structural deficit. This has been a topic of discussion in our community for a long time. It's not new, nor, again, was it created by the result of this administration or school board. I will continue to say that because it's important that the community understands it. It's a decades-old issue or longer. But what does this really mean? And how do we solve it? Raphael, would you be able to provide some clarity in simple terms in what this means for our district?
Yes, Dr. Horton, thank you. So structural deficit happens when the revenue that the district gets to fund its operation is actually lower than the expenditures, the money that we actually spend to run the district. So over time, if that happens over time, it creates a structure whereby the money that we get doesn't align well with the money that we spend. And that's what structural deficit is, in a nutshell. And as Dr. Horton explained, this is not something new. This has actually been going on in the district for decades. What has been helpful was the referendum that was passed in 2017. What it did, it gave us the breathing room to be able to close the structural deficit, whereby the additional tax receipt made it possible for the meantime for revenue to come in higher than the money that we spend to run the district.
Thanks again, Raphael. It's apparent that the structural deficit has an impact on our financial projections. Kathy, recently these projections were shared with our board finance committee. Can you give us a sense of what we're looking at over the next few years? And also, what impact the referendum had and how those funds are being used?
Thank you, Dr. Horton. So the financial projections for FY22 through FY26, which were presented to the Finance Committee meeting in February, project an updated and more challenged picture of the district's finances. We currently no longer project a balanced budget for next year, for FY22. In fact, we are projecting a deficit of almost $1.9 million. We are experiencing this deficit primarily because of the pandemic. With the COVID-19 pandemic, the district lost $3.4 million in revenues and experienced additional expenditures, mainly for COVID pandemic mitigation and online learning. So with these additional expenditures, with additional pressures from the state, and with increasing expenditures, our financial picture will look more challenging next year. As a result, not only FY22 has currently a deficit, but all the subsequent years. Of course, we are not going to sit idly. By law, the district is required to have a balanced budget. The district will be implementing efficiencies and budget reductions. 74% of our budgeted expenditures is spent on instruction and on direct student services. With our budget reductions, we will make every effort to make sure that these budget reductions do not affect instructions and our classrooms. And to answer the questions about referendum reserves, Dr. Horton, thanks to our taxpayers and thanks to the 2017 referendum, the district was able to restore its fund balance, which went from 19% to over 40%. We will do everything in our power to preserve these reserves for the future use and for the community and District 65 students. And they will only be spent if the district were to pass a deficit budget.
Thank you, Kathy. You know, Raphael, I know you and I have received a lot of questions along with our school board about the CARES funding and federal stimulus. Can you share more about how the pandemic has impacted our financial outlook? How has federal stimulus helped? How is this all impacting our projections?
Thank you, Dr. Horton, again. So the CARES Act that was passed last March provided school district, including District 65, with about $800,000 in additional money to help with the cost of pandemic. Now, of that $800,000, we also have to share with private schools in Evanston. Mm-hmm. Now, that's the first round of CARES Act. The second round of CARES Act was passed in December of last year. We have not received any of that money, and we are projected to receive just over $3 million. But I just want to let you know that just directly with the money that we've spent on mitigation, we've spent just well over $4 million. So even with the CARES Act that has been allocated, and I want to point out that the CARES Act is actually reimbursement based. So we don't get the money right away. What we have to do is we have to incur the expenses and then go back to the state and say, can you reimburse us for these COVID related expenses? So with that being said, we've spent well beyond the amount that we project to collect from the CARES Act. So we still have to come up with a way to make up the difference. In addition to the CARES Act, what the pandemic has also done is it's actually hit us on the local side of the revenue. One part is the property taxes. Normally, the community of Evanston is very, very disciplined in making sure when we send tax bills out, we collect 99% of those tax bills. But because of the pandemic and the impact on everyone, we know a lot of people have been hit economically. We realized that we would not be able to collect the level of taxes that we had collected in the past. So that will impact us with property taxes. And it will also impact us as far as what Kathy mentioned earlier, the local funds, the child care fees. We are now running our child care program right now. So that means the fees that we will collect from those parents who send their kids to us, we're not going to get that. But the interesting thing is our employees are still employed. They're providing support with hybrid learning, but we're not getting any money for them for childcare.
Thanks, Raphael. I think that provided a great deal of clarity on what we're expecting and what has happened related to stimulus funding. I have heard a resounding commitment from our administration and our school board in taking the necessary action to address the district's financial challenges and structural deficits, and to do so in an inclusive way. Dr. Horton, I think the $1 million question is, what are our next steps? What comes next?
That's a great question. While revenue loss and increased expenses largely due to COVID-19 pandemic are forcing our hand to address deficits sooner than anticipated, the biggest takeaway that our community must understand is that we do everything possible to preserve the academic, SEL, and overall educational experiences for children. We will, and we prioritize preserving this opportunity for our students to continue to learn at high levels and be supported. We also deeply value our educators and school staff and the roles that they play. I want to be clear, we know that we cannot run a school without teachers. We need teachers. But we also know that there are other key players in this work that have really extreme value to the overall process of educating our children. We have our custodians, we have our secretaries, we have our paraprofessionals, we have our administrators. They're all valuable. And so we must be strategic and intentional about how we approach this budget deficit. We also want to preserve a supportive, high-quality work environment with opportunities for growth as well. I'm going to talk about the phases in which we're going to approach this work, and there are 3 phases. Now, these 3 phases are over the course of a few years, but phase 1 is what we're getting ready to walk into. We will be proposing some budget reductions at our March 8th board meeting in a work session with our board to engage them in a discussion about that will impact. These are more budget reductions as we talk about the structural deficit. There are other key pieces that we could address right now. Phase 2, which many parts of phase 2 will be have started this year, will not be completed to the fall. So we have the curriculum audit. We have to be able to look at our curriculum overall and not just what's written, what's taught, and what's assessed, but from organization perspective. We must look at it also from policy perspective there are multiple layers to that. We have to also launch a master facility plan. If we don't know what our buildings offer, the life expectancy, we talk about how much does it cost to repair schools versus potentially building a new one or consolidating. Those are conversations that we got to talk about. This master facility plan will give us that. We've also just released and launched a student assignment advisory group. There are applications that are out. Please go to our website if you have not seen them. The application closes, if I'm not mistaken, on March 22nd. We're looking for individuals who are interested in being a part of this change. I know there are a lot of people who are interested, but please put in an application. But that student assignment plan, the recommendations will not be complete until a year from now. So this is why it's in phase 2. We also are operating, we have to do a demographic study, right? We all know that we have to be aware of how children are being developed and also produced in this community. That is very important. And then the other part that we have to get to is building a strategic plan. We can't build a strategic plan without having the data from those other processes that I mentioned earlier. That information will all become available in phase 2. But I would also say in phase 2, what you're going to see we make as we push to eliminate our P cards. That is just one of our features right now that we as administration has identified as things that we can do better. And that is something that's coming on the pipeline that we'll be putting on the table shortly. And then phase 3 is the actual plan itself to make these changes. And these changes will take place over the course of a 3 to 5 year window. So we would not be making the right decision if we said in phase 3, everything that's recommended, we make it happen now. Of course, we can't do that. We do know that there's a population of students in the 5th ward, right, that have been neglected for quite some time, and we have to address that. We also know that there are potential opportunities for us to consolidate schools. Who knows what that will look like? As we talk about this advisory group, they will give us advice and give us some guidance on what they expect, and there'll be surveys, there'll be focus groups, opportunities for everyone who wants to be engaged in that. And those are our phases. At the end of the day, our students remain our top priority. And when people hear the word reduction, fear or concern are the first emotions that are summoned, rightfully so. While change is for sure scary, and these concerns are understandable, please know that preserving the learning environment, educational experience for all children, as well as our investments in equity will remain at the forefront of our decision-making. Again, every layer from administration all the way through our district will be impacted by our structural deficit approach.
Thanks, Dr. Horton. I just did want to remind everybody who's watching is that we have a lot of information on our website about everything that was discussed today. So all of the presentations and memos and videos from our finance committee meetings, the student assignment committee application that Dr. Horton referenced, all of that is available on our website, as well as an outline of these phases and next steps, our budget at a glance document. So I really encourage our community to visit our website at district65.net. Right on the homepage in the quick links section, there is a button for budget planning and financial projections, as well as the student assignment advisory committee. So please go and check out those resources. So Dr. Horton, if you have any closing remarks for us, or if there's anything anybody else wants to add before we wrap up today.
I just want to thank you all for sharing your expertise. I think our community will benefit from the insight you all shared with us today. Please stay on the lookout for future updates regarding our financial outlook and remaining opportunities in the school year for our community to be involved in its ongoing conversation. Our new budget survey will be available, and we encourage everyone to take a few minutes to complete and share their voice. We look forward to connecting with our families again for our next round of conversations with the superintendent. Thank you for joining today. Wishing you all a safe and productive week.